Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to Harpin On Rugby, where with the help of some fellow fans, I get to harp on what's going on with Leinster, Ireland, and the wider rugby world. First up, joining me this week is someone making his 68th pod appearance. Welcome back to Mr. Connor Cronin.
Good to be back. 68 there, creeping up, creeping ever
Indeed,
closer
indeed.
to a number that we won't talk about the next time I'm on.
Absolutely. We'll skip straight to 70. And also with us is someone who is a shoo-in to win the Best Newcomer Gong at the end of season awards. And that's not only because he's the only newcomer this season, he's now earning cap number 9. Hello once more to Mr. Hugo Gordon.
Thanks very much for having me back again, Jeff.
Great to see you. Great to have you both on. Okay, listen, let's crack on with our feature match of the week. Here's the generic 50-word summary of what happened on Saturday. Leinster overpowered Glasgow 37-19 in the United Rugby Championship semi-final at Aviva Stadium, securing a place in the final. Dan Sheehan and Jamie Osborne each scored twice, with Thomas Clarkson and Kieran Frawley adding to the tally. Glasgow managed some late tries, but Leinster's dominance in attack and defence proved decisive. Now, the lads have picked out some key themes from the match, and we're going to start with Connor, who's going to be harping on just how important it was for Leinster to have both Dan Sheehan and Tommy O'Brien back in the starting lineup.
Yeah, and I think so. I know you guys were talking last week, and you were talking about who, if other players weren't available, who'd be a good captain and that kind of thing. And I think the fact that Dan's name got mentioned a couple of times is a real measure of the kind of player he is. You can see it in the first 15 seconds of this game how important both of those players are. Because off the kickoff, once the tackle's made, it's Tommy O'Brien with a turnover. It's Dan Sheehan standing a little bit to infield of that, saying to the ref, "Sir, sir, sir." And suddenly the whistle goes, and Dan's the first man running over to pat Tommy on the back and applaud him and say, "Well done, that's a great job." Go another couple of minutes into the play, and you've got Dan off the back of a line out. He throws a loose pass, which Tommy O'Brien cleans up really, really well. And then it's only a couple more phases before it's Dan going over for a try himself. When you look at just these first couple of minutes, when you see the work rate, when you see the desire, when you see how much they wanted to be involved, that's when you get a real measure for how important it was to have them on the pitch. Add to that Dan's leadership, and it's so good to have the two of them firing well. For every Leinster player, when they're on form, it's very hard to play against them when they're doing all the good things right. And I watched the match back with that view, where I was just kind of watching, going, okay, what's Dan doing? What's Tommy doing? And in every play, I'm watching what's going on. And I ended up setting up a little set of lists for myself, and I was ticking off where, if I saw something different, I was writing it in, and if I saw it again, I was doing little hatches, so I knew how often it was going right. And Dan had, by my count, and I could be wrong, it was either 13 or 14 lineouts. I might have missed one while I was in the middle of doing a job during the rewatch. Sorry, that's 13 or 14 lineouts that were our throw, and we won. That were clean ball. We had 2 that Glasgow contested and took from us. But it wasn't off a bad throw, or it wasn't a bad call. It's just, I think Glasgow read the line out well. But that means that we had 15 or 16 well-taken lineouts that, okay, yeah, we lost a couple of them, but that's a much better ratio than we've been working on for the rest of the season. Coming into this game, we had 50 lost lineouts. We lost 2, yeah, but we won far, far more than we won. And we won clean ball. And that's a massive part of what Dan does for us. Other important little contributions he makes, disrupting clean ruck. So, making a mess out of Glasgow ball legally, or it must be legal, otherwise we'd be penalised for it, right? Offloading. He's got a couple of offloads in the game. Shooting up in defence, something we've watched Gary Ringrose do a lot this year. Clearly, he had a big role in that this weekend. One in particular forces a horrific pass that results in us getting a line out. We've got him hunting for turnovers. We've got breaks down the wing after a line out. We've got carries. We've got 2 tries. We've got positive driving mauls. We've got him rushing up box kicks. We've got him making yards after contact. and all that's in 54 minutes.
Is that all?
He was only on the pitch for 54 minutes.
I know.
But everything, like as I watched, I don't think other than the two lost lineouts, there's anything Dan was doing where you'd look at it and say, okay, we have a negative loss on that interaction. Or a net loss, I should say. Sorry, not a negative loss. Negative is a loss. But where you'd say you have a net loss on the interaction. Almost everything is a positive impact on how Leinster get to play and how we get to move forward with the ball. And then I did the same with Tommy O'Brien. You know, I marked he's running decoy lines. He's holding up a tackler for a maul. He's got the turnover I already mentioned that was very responsible for us getting close enough to getting the try in the first place. We've got him taking high ball. We've got him where he doesn't take it cleanly, knocking it back on our side. Where it's their high ball, we have him contesting and making it difficult for the Glasgow players. He's got tackles. He's got kick and chase. He's got counter rucking and rucking over. One in particular that is really present in my mind from the rewatch, where he's there just driving through the Glasgow ruck and driving over it, which results in Dan being the one to pick up the ball afterwards. I say he's putting pressure on their kick chase. They end up spilling one where he's going for it and making it so difficult for their back three that they end up knocking it on into touch. And we've got the line out. He's got offloads. He's got a dominant tackle. I remember as I was sitting north stand, so I was watching the game further away from me for lots of the second half. And in the lead up to a great break that Tommy has in the second half, I was watching the play because the play started as I was looking at it on the right-hand side of the pitch. And as the ball comes out, you can see him come the whole way around the back of the field. It was actually incredible to watch from that vantage point. You know, from the Hugo Keenan view, as he goes running around the back of everybody to eventually get into space where he's then cutting back infield, making a break. He's got smart decisions. He knows when to contest. He knows when to. You see it for Frawley's try. He knows when to say, "I'm not making that. I'll take the contact. There's space for somebody else to make this try happen." And instead of waiting for somebody to come and rescue the ball, he's quick enough to realize, there's the man I'm waiting for, and up pops the offload. There is so much good in what Tommy O'Brien is doing. We've said it for a couple of seasons. A clean bill of health for a full season, and let's see what he can do. God, he can do some good stuff, can't he? And I think the difference having players like that in the squad, the difference they make, because if you want to talk about leadership, you lead by example for a lot of these guys. You know, shouting at a fella saying, "You screwed up, what are you going to do about it?" isn't as effective as saying, "You screwed up, but I'm here to pick up the pieces for you." Or, "You've done well, and I'm here to tell you how good you've done." Those kinds of leadership moments that you get from Dan and Tommy's moments of just keep doing, focus on the next job. What's my next positive impact? I won't say either of them had a perfect game. You know, nobody ever has a perfect game. But if you're ranking Leinster's players at the weekend, like I thought before I'd seen the watch back, I thought Tommy O'Brien would have been a very, very good shout for player of the match. And after the watch back, Dan, if they'd given it to Dan Sheehan instead, I wouldn't have said that was a bad decision at all. Like it's as I say, so much good in what both of them do. And it's not even, I mean, there's some of the stuff that Sheehan does. And you look at it and you say, well, you know, that's why he's first choice hooker and not Kelleher. And then you watch the game back and you see Kelleher breaking through defenders and making 25 meters out on the wing, which is where you'd often see Sheehan lurking every now and then. So it's not that, it's not even a thing where I'm saying he's so much better in his position. It's just having him on the pitch is so much better for Leinster because the positivity he brings, the attitude, the mental skills, the willingness to put himself on the line in some spaces, and the same with Tommy O'Brien. What he brings sets such a positive sense of how the players want to play, sets such a positive example for all the others. And I think, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. And the lads are definitely a rising tide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were going into this game, like in our WhatsApp group or whatever. I mean, we were anxious to say the least. And I mean, it was justified anxious. I mean, that's going back a good few weeks. It's still it's not just carrying from that Northampton game, but also from the performances since. Even though we've been winning, but there's still been question marks. And when we did our preview with Kigo, we looked at the starting lineup, and the one good thing was that both Dan, those two players in particular, Dan was on the bench last week against Scarlets, and this time he was starting, and Tommy O'Brien, who was under that dreaded further assessment required heading in the injury report, he ended up in the starting lineup, and that was really positive. And so what we wanted to see from Leinster was something positive, literally from the kickoff. Now, maybe not this literally, the way it ended up. It was the Glasgow kicked off. We kicked off, but we chased it down. Tommy O'Brien was over it for a jackal, like the very first from the restart, penalty into the corner. Now, successful line out, good Glasgow defense in that series. They held us out for like multiple double-digit phases, but we still persevered. And then there was Dan Sheehan. So literally, from the very kickoff, the two of them made an impact. And like you say, it's the effect they have on other players. You saw, like in Dan's case, he didn't play the full match, and then on comes Ronan Keller. You saw a big run from him towards the end of the match. It's like he brings up his game as well. And then, like you say, Tommy O'Brien, he inspires players. I think one player that loves playing with them is Jordy Barrett. We've noticed how in previous matches, Jordy would actually, when he gets the ball and he gets a bit of broken play run, he'd go running towards Tommy's wing. He says, I'm gonna bring the play over to here, get this guy involved, because game recognizes game kind of thing. Tommy is like, he's in that kind of form, and it's amazing to see. So we'll talk about other players' performances. It wasn't just the two of them, but it was good to see not only their names in the starting lineup, because they can have such an influence, but such an immediate impact on the game. Well, what did you think, Hugo?
Yeah, so they're both just remarkable players, and having them both back in the starting lineup for this one, as you say, was just so important. Just starting with Dan in particular, and just a few kind of numbers that jumped out at me when I was looking at this one. First of all, in that passage of play, between when he throws the ball in from the line out in that opening attack that we have, so not including that touch of the ball, he touches the ball 5 times in the next minute and 45 seconds and clears a ruck. If you watch it back, he is involved in basically every single little passage of play. And it's remarkable the speed at which he's coming in. When he picks up the ball, he's making a yard or two with every single carry. He's hitting rucks. He's back to his feet again, and just the sheer kind of hunger and the sheer determination to be involved in all those passages of play was just an incredible kind of start to the game. And it really was a kind of a real just boost straight off the starting gun. Couple more numbers. He now has 7 tries in 5 matches in the URC this season. That's including only 3 starts. He's averaging a try every 25 minutes of URC game time this season, which is ridiculous. If you expand it out to all tournaments, including the Champions Cup and the Heineken and the Six Nations, he has 14 tries and 13 appearances, or a try every 44 minutes. He is an extraordinary player. He does seem to be getting better with every single passing year. If you'd asked me this time last year, I'm not sure that I necessarily would have said that he was the best hooker in the world. I think there were some definitely great other candidates. If you ask me right now, I think he's the standout. If you're putting a World 15 together, it's him every day at number 2. He is some player. And Tommy, I'm just going to kind of go over really what Connor said, just his importance in both attack and defence. He had the most offloads and the most turnovers of any Leinster player in the game yesterday. As you say, he had that turnover to set us up for the opening try. His kind of, as Conor was saying, I think a lot of Leinster fans have been saying, if you can only get a clean run of held, a few games together, and we can see what he can do. I thought he'd be good. I didn't think he'd be this good, and his impact this season has been remarkable. And I think a big part of that has been his pace. Leinster really, really lacked that kind of lightning quick winger. He's not the fastest winger in the world, but he's certainly one of the fastest we've had in a while. And not only is that a benefit in and of itself, but particularly the way Leinster set up in defence this year, having that player who can make it back, who can scramble back, who can make those tackles has been huge for us. And he really has become. It's hard to imagine a kind of going into this season, you're kind of wondering how often he'd play, as it has been the last few seasons. Now it's hard to imagine this team without him, and when he's not there, I think we really struggle. So having those two back, kind of Leinster were night and day different from even a week ago, and having those two back in the starting line, I think the starting lineup was huge for that. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I think Tom said in the WhatsApp group in Dan's case, how he's graded a 2, but he's practically a 7 as well. It's what they do. It's what they do in other roles as well that brings him up. And in Tommy's case, I think I spoke a couple of weeks ago about how when he's defending, it's like he just comes into the tackles with such force. There's no way. Even if he gets a tiny piece of you, he's grabbing you no matter what. And he dominates those tackles. But it's also an attack as well. You say he may not be the quickest, but the confidence he has in himself, I think, is what gives him what gets him there. Like he did one run, he came in behind Sam. Obviously, must have given him a shout because Sam couldn't have seen him. He gave him a shout, knew who was coming behind him, and just kicked one over. And like he said, I know Tommy's going to get there. And he did. And he just went straight through, picked up the ball, and next thing we're in the 22. Just little things like that. It was amazing to see. And it was good to see the two of them. And it's good to see an overall decent performance from Leinster that has the fans, and particularly, buzzing again. The comments on the Facebook page, we got this one from Kevin Callahan, who said, the stadium was buzzing right from the first hit of kickoff. The team seemed to feed off it. 32 points clear on 65 minutes, having refused to let a decent enough Glasgow side play. Well, before we return to the pod, first a little reminder of all the different places you'll find us in the Rugger Sphere, like our YouTube channel, where on Tuesday you'll find our bonus clip. And this week our panel is going to chat about Sam Prendergast's place kicking, as well as what we can expect from the Bulls next week. To get access to all our latest content, as well as our presence on all the different social media platforms, you can bookmark us at linktree/Harpin On Rugby. And as ever, please be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe as needed. So now we turn to Hugo's main topic, and we've already spoken about the importance of having Dan and Tommy back in the starting lineup, but we also needed improved performances from the rest of the team.
Yeah, and what was so pleasing about yesterday compared to last week against Scarlets, compared to the previous game against Glasgow, where I think Leinster looked a little bit flat, and I think some players we needed to step up maybe hadn't, and that had caused us some problems. What was really pleasing about yesterday was seeing some of those players who have come under some criticism in recent weeks deliver that performance that we needed from them. And I'm going to start in the back row with Ryan Baird and Scott Penny. With Josh van der Flier out, I was a little bit worried about how this setup would work. Neither player has had their best season for Leinster. Baird is his form has maybe been improving a little bit in recent weeks. He was actually one of our better players against Northampton Saints, for example. But last week against Scarlets, he just didn't really seem to be with it. Poor handling, not really making that impact around the pitch that you would like. He is such an impressive physical athlete. His size, his pace, his power. But sometimes it's felt like we haven't necessarily seen him have that impact on games that we would have liked to see. Yesterday, we absolutely saw that from him. Again, absent Doris, absent Van der Flier, we needed players to step up and make carries. Ryan Baird made the most carries of anyone on the pitch, of any Leinster player on the pitch, 9 carries. He kind of was hitting rocks. He was everywhere around the park. He was leading our kick chase. It's him who makes that first tackle before Tommy O'Brien turns it over on that opening passage of play. He even had some nice passing too, actually, which has not been one of his fortes, it has to be said, this season. His handling and passing was so much improved from recent weeks. I don't know whether it's the fact he's just not wearing the scrum cap anymore, but he seems a player reborn in recent weeks, but particularly this week. This is his best performance this season in green or blue by a long way. He was player of the match. There was some competition in there and some other players who maybe you could have gone to as well, but he was absolutely one of the standouts on the pitch, and it's really kind of heartening to see that from him. And then over at 7, Scott Penny. Scott Penny who's been one of my favourite Leinster players since he burst onto the scene. He was so impressive as a young player coming into the team. Obviously made the kind of URC dream, the Pro 14 dream team and the early URC dream team in his early years. This has been probably a bit of a disappointing season for him, despite the fact he's had 16 starts, which is the most he's ever had in a single season for Leinster. He's only had one try, which is by far and away his least. Compare that to 9 a few seasons ago. And just in some of these big games, it sometimes felt like he's been a bit outmatched. He's not the biggest for a flanker, and sometimes it's felt like he just hasn't really been able to hit that level that we would have liked. And I was a little bit worried going into this game, frankly, that with both Baird out of form and with Penny there and not having Van der Fleer has been so important to us this season. But this was, as well as Baird, this was Scott Penny's best game this season, again, by a long, long way. He was defensively so important. He made 16 tackles, which is most of anyone on the pitch. But if you watch him, we talked a little bit earlier about Sheehan kind of shooting up out of the line. Penny does the same. Penny is his line speed is very, very aggressive in this game. And he's kind of moving up very quickly to disrupt Glasgow ball, make a nuisance of himself. I was really, really impressed by him. He's another one who needed a big performance and absolutely gave it. So that's great to see when we were missing, someone like Josh Van der Fleer, who has been so important to us. Jamie Osborne, another one. Again, I would go so far as to say was poor against Scarlets. Infamously didn't make a single tackle from 13 all game, which is not something you'd normally see. But he was a menace yesterday. It felt like every time he got his hands on the ball in attack, he was causing problems. He had the 2 tries, obviously, including, and then one more chalked off, which is very unlucky, an unusual Gibson Park mistake. The only thing that really stopped him from getting a hat trick. He had the most.
I think it's 2 chalked off.
Of course, yeah. Sorry,
the crossing call with Lowe, would have been another one.
I'd forgotten that was him on the end of that, actually. Yeah, so that's two chalked off, neither of which were his fault. He had the most clean breaks, the most defenders beaten, the most meters made of any Leinster player. It's easy to forget, given that he has now been kind of a regular in the Leinster setup now for a couple of years, just how young a player he is. It's obviously been kind of, very impressive series of milestones over the course of the last year. So being in the Leinster squad that was in the final of the Champions Cup last year, playing for Ireland, perhaps because of the competition from Jordy Barrett this year, we haven't seen as much of him maybe, and we haven't maybe seen him kind of deliver as much of those performances that we would have liked. Yesterday, he was really, really good again. And just a reminder of how good a player he is when he is on form. And then just the kind of a couple of other players who I wanted to mention because they've not necessarily been Leinster regulars. They haven't been poor when they've been there, but they just haven't featured maybe as much as they would have liked. Firstly, Tom Clarkson. Now, Clarkson's not had a bad season by any stretch of the imagination. He picked up his Ireland cap, his first Ireland cap this year. But he has been kind of really kind of third in the pecking order for a lot of this season, while both Furlong and Slimani have been fit. He's kind of really leapfrogged over both of them in recent weeks, and I thought he was very, very good in that first half. He was part of a Leinster front row that was causing Glasgow's front row all kinds of problems in the scrum, but some of his carrying was excellent, and his carrying for his try where he powers through, he carries into contact, he's tackled by about 3 players, he kind of gets stopped for a while and then kind of just decides, I know I can keep going, and just keeps pushing through to score. It's really impressive strength. He's, again, still, for a prop, he's still quite young, still plenty of room for growth, still plenty of experience to come. But this was a really impressive performance for him. Again, one of his better in blue all season, and that was really good to see. And I just wanted to mention another O'Brien as well, which is Jimmy O'Brien. Jimmy O'Brien has not played that much for Ireland or Leinster this season. He's lost his place in the lineup in Leinster to the likes of Tommy O'Brien coming in, and when Hugo Keenan is fit as well, that means that there just isn't room for Jimmy in that starting lineup. And while I don't disagree with that, it is a real shame because every time Jimmy O'Brien has played for Leinster this season, he has not put a foot wrong. Every time he's been called on, he's been excellent. He was excellent on the Leinster tour of South Africa earlier this season. He's been excellent the last couple of weeks when we've needed him to fill in. He was one of our better players in recent weeks when we've looked a little bit flat. So I did just want to mention him. He's not the player who's necessarily going to be kind of getting a lot of plaudits necessarily this season, but he's been quietly very busy and very effective. So it was, kind of, it's not just the kind of getting the guys who are going to deliver for you. It's maybe some of the guys who have been struggling a little bit in recent weeks, and seeing their performance yesterday was a huge statement. It was a really big part of why I'm feeling much more cheerful today than I was a couple of days ago. It's not just the win, it's the manner of the win, and who played well in it. It does leave me feeling that as we head into final next week, if we're still missing a couple of those players who've been out on that injury list, actually we had some players who've shown that they can put their hand up and step up if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the themes that impressed me from this game, it was the improvement in the players, but also just as a team, the ability to just recover after setbacks. I mean, and these are semifinals and finals. You're up against good teams. You're not going to get everything going your own way. You have to be able to push on. And I mean, you mentioned Jimmy O'Brien. Like, well, the one big surprise we saw from the starting lineup was that Hugo wasn't included. I mean, my thing going into this game was, well, if everyone could just play the way Hugo did last week, we'd be grand. But that was kind of contingent on Hugo being there. But listen, you said Jimmy O'Brien has played well. He's come in there. He can do a job at fullback, and he had a good game yesterday. They were all good. Clarkson, amazing runs. Baird and Penny, I think that was key as well. We were missing that back row strength, and it's giving us confidence that we're going into playing any South African team. You're going to need a strong back row display. So going next week as well. So it was good to see them. But also when going back to the setbacks, like we took that early lead. And that was a great start, but then straight away Glasgow, and I think that was their first attacking situation, and you could see it from the stands. They just manufactured the space out wide, and there it was. And next thing they're going for a try, and it's 7-5, and we're like, this could be a long afternoon. This could be close. We need to be able to bounce back. But then from their next attack, I think our defense kind of was able to allow for that, and we recovered from that, and they stayed on 5 points for a lot of that game, and so we recovered from that. And then you mentioned Jamie Osborne, like the disallowed tries. I mean, one of them was disallowed for crossing. James Lowe didn't quite agree, but on the very next play, when we got down into their 22, who's finishing it off? James Lowe to Jamie Osborne in space outright, and he goes over for the try. So every little setback we were able to recover. And another shout out as well, maybe to Jemison Gibson Park. He did some. We were just talking in the WhatsApp group about the way he threaded the needle to Osborne for that try. I mean, that pass was just. It had to beat about it. Like I think Tom estimated about 250 players but at speed, and it was like right in front of them, falling over the line. It's an amazing pass. So great performances all around. What did you think, Connor?
Yeah, look, I can only agree with what Hugo said. Baird and Penny really, really stepped up, and it was great to see. Jimmy O'Brien, very, very consistent every time he's been asked to play. I would have mentioned Jamie Osborne if it had been my segment. I would have mentioned Thomas Clarkson. I think it's worth giving a shout out to Ryan and McCarthy, who I think both played really well. I think the fact that, and I know it's not just them in the line out, but they're doing a lot of the lifts, and they're taking a reasonable amount of ball themselves as well. And a lot of the unseen work. They're hitting a lot of rucks. They're doing a lot of good things throughout. And I think both of them are worthy of a mention as well. And as you've just said, Jemison Gibson Park, who's just, when he's on form, he's just unplayable. That pass is so good. And it's not just that one. Like, look at the one to Sheehan for his first try as well. It's the same. It's just it's that ability to say, oh, that's where the space will be. And isn't that great? Sure, we've a man right there. And he just reads it all so quickly. I think Gibson Park had a really, really good game. And credit to McGrath, when he came on, was very, very steady. And I think the other player who absolutely has to get mentioned for his last appearance in the Aviva, possibly, we don't know, but it could end up being his last appearance for Leinster, is Ross Byrne. He's so dependable. We've said it many times. He was never going to set the world alight under our game plan, but everything he does it right, and he does it well. And we get another look at that for the last 20 minutes of the game yesterday. It'll be a sad day seeing him go next week.
Absolutely. And of course, we're thinking maybe next week against the Bulls, we're talking about the importance of a back row. It's very likely we could go with a 6-2 bench, which probably means Ross Byrne won't feature, but we'll see what happens there. But like you say, yeah, it was good to see him at least for one last time in the Aviva. And he got his Heroes T-shirt as well with the Leinster Supporters Cup this season. So he has been getting a decent send off from the Leinster fans. And sure, like I say, the fans on the Facebook group have agreed. There's a lot of more positive comments here from Christy O'Connor, who says definitely a much better performance than the last few weeks. I was expecting a tight game. Glasgow were never in it. We let them off easy a few times, but we were never losing that game. I just hope we show the same attitude next week. Well, do you agree, or would you have said the same thing a different way? Why don't you check out our Facebook page after the full-time whistle after Leinster and Ireland matches and leave your thoughts? Well, elsewhere in the URC, in the other semi-final, the Vodacom Bulls secured a 25-13 victory over the Sharks at Loftus Versfeld to reach their second consecutive URC final. Despite 3 yellow cards, they led 15-3 at half-time. Sebastian de Klerk and Caden Mooney starred, while late scores from Ethan Hooker and David Creel sealed the win. They now catch a flight to Dublin for next Saturday's final. Now, going back to our feature match, for now, the lads are going to go quickly over some more topics we found from Saturday's match, starting with Connor, who's going to look at Leinster's defence.
Yeah, I got a text message I had to double check it earlier, 16-24. So at that stage, the score was 37-12. And the text said that so far, on trips to Dublin this year, Glasgow have scored 17 points and conceded 102. Look, in fairness, it went on to be 24 points to 102 by the end, but I think it really just shows how stingy the defence really is when it's shooting right. And shooting is an appropriate term because, as Hugo's pointed out, we've got Penny shooting. I was mentioning Dan shooting up. You got players who it felt like this week everybody was running at the right time and into the right space. Yes, Glasgow came at us with a quick score. I think they managed to figure out how to get the right players out wide fast, to be against, essentially for us, the wrong players as they got over there. So a well worked try, and then Leinster kind of look and say, well, you won't be doing that again, and they didn't. I mean, I really don't feel that there was any point. You feel differently in the stadium at the time, but on a watch back, I didn't feel in the first 55 or 60 minutes that there was any point Glasgow were really threatening. There were times when, yes, they're coming at us hard, and yes, they're really putting the work in to try and make ground and make phases, but they couldn't get their maul going against us. And maul defense is going to be a big thing next week. The Bulls have more yards with mauls than they do with regular carries, I think, or something similar. I heard in stats given on their match yesterday. They've some inordinate amount of yards made. So to see our maul defense working well is brilliant. To know that those wide channels, they weren't really accessible except for that first try, which is great because that's somewhere the Bulls might think they could hit us. They'll find it hard to go looking through the game tape from the weekend saying we could get them there. There's not a lot of gaps. And I feel like everybody on Saturday just said, you know what, lads, this is our defensive system. This is what we do. This is how we do it right. Let's go. And they did. And look, we leak 2 late tries. One is, Dobie sells a very good dummy when a lot of defence are they're not right for his try. You can see that there are players who've pushed too far up and haven't made it back to be onside when he goes to throw a dummy and steps inside and canters round for it's a good score. Is he going to, are players going to get opportunities like that often in a game? Absolutely not. So he took it well. And then I think maybe just 1 or 2 players bites into the maul a little bit more than they needed to, creating a bit of space for Tuapolotu to get through once the ball came out of that maul for their third try. But again, it's hard to find those gaps. It's hard to find the mistakes. I'm not a video analyst. I'm sure the Bulls have somebody better qualified than me, and I'm definitely one-eyed with it. But I think the defense has really stood up this weekend, and if we can get the same this coming weekend, I'd be very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been saying in the past few weeks about how Leinster's form from the early part of the season that impressed week in, week out just seemed to disappear, and things that we were, learned to take for granted. And one of the things was not just, the overall defense, but like game after game, there'd be sequences where the other team would be attacking and they'd be retaining possession each time. But because we'd be hitting them, there'd be these double hits, and they may start at our 22, but they'd be pushed back. All of a sudden, they still have the ball, but they're back at the halfway line. And that kind of
Yeah,
disappeared over the past few weeks, but it was back on Saturday. And
I said it in a previous pod where you've got a crowd cheering because like, oh, they've made 15 yards, yeah, for a net loss of 3.
hmm.
And those 15 yards are great because you've got a player bursting through, but how far has he had to be pushed back to then get back to that point?
Yeah, it's definitely good to see. Like you say, that sure Jake White will be studying that between now and next week, but it's still good to see it functioning on point for the most of the game. Those 2 tries at the end, can't be be really critical to look at that. The game was over. Looking at next week, and they should get things back on point. Okay, listen, that brings us back to Hugo, who's going to have a quick look actually at the reigning champion Glasgow's themselves. It was their 3rd performance at the Aviva in 58 days.
Yeah, and look, I think Leinster were very good yesterday. I think that was great to see. I think Glasgow will be probably a little bit disappointed in themselves. They were very they really took it to us a couple of weeks ago when they came to Dublin in the final match of the URC. After a little bit of a slow start, they kind of really turned it on in the second half against Stormers and pulled away. I do think Glasgow have one of the best backlines in rugby. They are obviously the reigning champions. They are a very, very good side, and they just never really hit those heights that they would have wanted to yesterday. And look, a lot of that would have been Leinster pressure. Our pack got on top of them early on. And that ended up being a real problem for them. Kind of that we've already talked about Baird, Penny, Conan as well. Kind of back row really kind of nuking them with the breakdown a little bit. Their front row and Glasgow scrum, and in fairness to them, they have had quite a few injuries in the front row recently. They've really been missing Xander Fagerson the last few weeks. But the front row has been a problem for the last few weeks for them. It was a problem for them against us a couple of weeks ago. It was a problem for them last week against Stormers, and it was a real problem for them yesterday. Our front row took them to pieces early on, and kind of that's just the story that kind of carried on all the way through. And just generally, they weren't able to get that purchase at the breakdown. They weren't able to win those collisions. And it meant that they just weren't able to kind of put their stamp on the game. Their discipline was terrible. Depending on, I've read a few different numbers on this, but they had anywhere between 13 and 17 penalties, which is just a killer for any team. And it just meant that they were never able to bring that back line into the game, that back line that's been so dangerous and so much fun to watch all season. I thought their halfback pairing really had an off day. George Horn, who has been one of the players of the season, in my view, he's been really exceptional for Glasgow. A little bit unlucky, I think, that he hasn't featured for Scotland more this season. Had one of his worst games of the season, just kind of passing not working, kicks going awry. It just wasn't happening for him at all. He got the early try, but it really wasn't his day at all. And Adam Hastings, who started at fly half, was so anonymous that he got hooked at halftime. The plan, I think, had been to move Jordan to 12, Tupelo to 13, to target that kind of vulnerable defensive axis of Prendergast and Jamie Osborne. And it was a kind of good idea in theory, but it just didn't work. And when both your halfbacks are having an off day, that's really, really not going to help you out. And it just meant they could never bring that back 3 into it at all. Kyle Rowe, very clever early score from Glasgow. And, I said going into the game that actually the way Glasgow attack in transition is exactly the kind of team that's caused us problems all season. It's the exact way that Northampton hurt us in the Champions Cup semi-final. It's exactly that Scarlets have hurt us a couple of times this season. And I was quite worried about it. And that kind of first, as you say, their first real attack, they break through on the left. lovely little kick through from Rowe and Horner's over the score, and it's alarm bells start ringing. But actually, it's pretty much the last attack they have for the next 50 to 60 minutes that really looks remotely like scoring. Um, uh, the likes of Rowe, Kyle Steyn, Josh McKay have been really impressive this season, really dangerous with ball in hand, just weren't able to get into the game at all. I did think their centre pairing worked a little bit better. I thought Tom Jordan was just very industrious. He wasn't able to make a huge amount of ground, but if you kind of watch it back, he's really carrying hard into those tackles, making yards where he can. I thought, not a lot went right for him necessarily, but actually it wasn't down to lack of effort. And Sione Tuipulotu, who really was, and one of the things I love about him is when Glasgow have been poor this season, he is a player who always steps up and says, right, I'm going to do this myself, even if you guys aren't going to help me. And he was excellent again yesterday, kind of almost a kind of a kind of one-man effort at times. It's him who sets up that break on the left wing that leads to their first try, even though it's not him who sends the kick through. He caused poor Sam Prendergast a lot of difficulty running down his channel all game. Quite a few of Sam Prendergast's missed tackle count would have come from Sione running at him. And eventually he kind of just brushes aside a few defenders for the late score. It's too little too late by then for Glasgow, but Tuipulotu he's some player. If it's me and I'm picking a Lions test team, it's him I'm starting at 12. He has been so impressive for Glasgow all season. They've really missed him when he's been injured, and I think yesterday was kind of just another testament to what an unbelievable player he is. But he can't do it all himself, and Glasgow, I think, will be just a little bit disappointed that for all that Leinster played well, I don't think they really will feel that they kind of did enough to make it difficult for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Tom last week who was talking about the way Leinster approached it against the Scarlets, and we sort of had two different kind of approaches to the game that we clicked back and forth from. It was a kicking game, the territory, and then this sort of offloading after the tackle kind of game. And I think we saw that again at the Aviva, but I think we maybe have been smarter about when we deployed it. We did a lot more of the kicking, and I think the tactics was on point. We were doing it a lot better than Glasgow were. We were making gains every time we were doing it, and I think that was key. And like you say, Glasgow, I mean, they did so well to win the competition last season. They're amazing at this time of year. This year, I think they're a bit unluckier with injuries. Like you say, they're missing Fagerson, they're missing Jones, and so they don't have their ideal lineup. I was surprised they had Jordan at 10 last week, and having had Hastings there the last two times, I thought maybe it was kind of, well, this is your third time you're going to the Aviva. Maybe we'll try something different. But they went with Hastings again. That obviously didn't work out. They yanked him at halftime, but it just wasn't working for them on the day. So I think it was a deserved win for Leinster overall. And I think it was good to get that. It was a confident performance, I think, from Leinster, and which is good to see, especially week before a final. So that it's all good, all positive. Okay, listen, we're going to leave it there for now, lads. Many thanks to Connor Hugo for joining me. Hope to have you both on again soon. Thanks, lads.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks both.
As for our next batch of Harpin, we'll have our 80+ column posting on Wednesday before we turn our attention to next Saturday's URC Grand Final. Please be sure to follow us on any or all of our social media platforms, which you'll find at linktree/Harpin On Rugby. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.